Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to the Mad Max Minute Podcast, the daily podcast where we break down Mad Max 1 minute at a time. I'm Rick.
And I'm Julia.
And today we're talking about minute 61, which begins with Toecutter holding Grease Rat by the nose, and it ends with Jessie finding a severed hand hanging from the roof rack. Good Monday morning, Julia.
Happy Monday.
So, before we sat down and recorded for today, we went downstairs and we watched the crew commentary of the minute that we're going to talk about right now.
Yes.
And the entire time that Toecutter has a hold of the Grease Rat's nose, all they're doing is talking about how big Nick Lathoris' nose is. I think they actually call it a signpost at one point.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They reiterate that it was Hugh Keays-Byrne's idea, and that not even the actor, Nick
Lathoris, yeah.
Yeah, not even he knew that Hugh was going to grab his nose.
Yeah, they were very cordial. They apologized to Nick in the commentary, but at the same time, just drawing attention to how big his nose was. They said it was almost impossible to resist reaching out and grabbing it.
Had to.
But going back to the story, I mentioned last week this idea that the Grease Rat is kind of a, maybe not...
You mean an informant? Oh, no, that's too formal a word.
Yeah, like not necessarily a direct associate, but in some way... has come in contact with this group of bikies before.
Yeah, maybe has an understanding that...
like protection for information type of thing. Because he just gives up this information so freely.
Yes.
And with no prompting whatsoever. I mean, he was already going to say everything he already said without getting grabbed.
Yeah, he didn't need the motivation of, I guess, a threat of physical violence to give up the information. Which you hear in his tone. After he gets nose grabbed and is saying, everything he knows, he's got this tone, this attitude in his voice. And I recognize it because I've done it. Giving up information that you were going to give up anyways, and if the person asking had had 2 seconds more patience, you would have given it up freely. So I definitely recognized his tone there.
Yeah, I think the Grease Rat was on his way. He was getting to that point.
Yes.
But Toecutter didn't want to sit there and listen to the whole situation of them leaving the tire behind or needing it fixed or him going to work on it, which, let's be real. We said this many times last week. I'm going to say it again. He was taking his sweet time getting to that tire, and there was no way that he was going to fix it in any sort of reasonable time frame.
Do you think that Toecutter himself has experienced the Grease Rat and how he communicates before? Do you think he knows that the Grease Rat is a roundabout kind of guy, and he has information, he just spills everything out?
So on the one hand, Toecutter has prior experience with the Grease Rat. He knows how to handle the Grease Rat. On the other hand, Toecutter just has no patience for fools.
Yes.
And I feel like both options are equally valid.
Yes. Yeah, so do I. I agree.
Yeah, considering that we see Toecutter and... Did I see Bubba? I don't know. In a later minute, we're going to see Toecutter back at the mechanic shop. And... so that kind of tells me that they're familiar with this establishment, especially considering that just beyond it seems to be a popular camping spot for the acolytes.
Yes. Now, we do get some hints that the gang works on their own bikes, but that doesn't mean occasionally they don't need help from an actual professional mechanic.
Yeah.
So it seems quite advantageous of them to form a relationship with a mechanic shop.
Yeah, because even if the repair is minor, some things are just easier to do when you have the proper tools.
Yes.
And you don't always have the proper tools when you're out on the road.
Absolutely. You can only keep so much with you, a basic set.
So, yeah. This whole idea of them coming back and having prior experience, it totally makes sense to me, at least.
I think so.
So, Toecutter reiterates, who are they? Grease Rat says a couple passing through. Said they were heading north, maybe. And I found that response to be kind of interesting sounding. Because the way the Grease Rat says it, he's attributing the information directly to the couple. He's not making any sort of statement like, I think they're heading north, or I got the sense that they were heading north. He said, they said they were heading north. Maybe. So that way, if Toecutter is unable to find the van, they can't go back to the grease rat and say, hey, you gave us bad information. Because he could say, hey, I gave you exactly what they gave me.
Yes.
Like, he's kind of covering his own butt here. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes, and that actually, to me, reiterates your idea that he is working for them in some way. Mm-hmm. That he already knows he needs to choose his words a little carefully to place responsibility on the original source of the information and not himself.
Yeah. It kind of gives me the feeling that the movie is saying that these two characters, this is not the first time they've met.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just reinforces all these suppositions I've had. But we cut from Toecutter and the grease rat at the mechanic shop, and then we catch up with the van, which is kind of pulling off to the side of the road by a river. Mm-hmm. And we start off with this kind of high shot of the van, and it really having it framed this way, it really draws attention to the fact that there is a surfboard lashed to the top of that, and we never see anybody use it.
Correct.
I mean, that's a pretty big thing to take along on vacation and never actually end up using. Now, granted, we haven't seen them necessarily go to the ocean, per se. I mean, we've seen them stop by the river, and Jessie eventually goes to the ocean.
Yes, and the area of ocean that Jessie, that Jessie goes to, I can't recall. Do we see the water much?
It's very calm. There's
it's very calm.
lot
so
of
maybe
waves.
It's like in a bay, somewhere protected from the waves.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think perhaps they were on their way to somewhere else? This wasn't their destination. This was just a stopping point for some rest and relaxation.
Well, it's hard to say if they were going specifically to surf somewhere, because the place they end up, May's Farm, I mean, you gotta hike for at least 3 minutes of movie time.
Yeah.
before you can get to the beach. And even then, it's not a good surfing beach. And so it kind of makes me wonder why they would even bother to bring along a surfboard, other than the fact that Australians love surfing.
Yes. And I think that tells us that this was not their final destination.
Yeah, that May's Farm was just kind of a stopping
point. And in the next few minutes, we get some hints that they are familiar with this area. People there are familiar with them. So I think their ultimate destination was further north.
That makes sense.
To somewhere that was a good surfing spot. But it's a shame that we didn't get a surfing movie out of this.
Yeah, I mean, we see Jessie go to the beach, and she could have just taken that surfboard and brought it down to the water. But then again, like, if Jessie wasn't the surfer, then that would be like, well, Max is the only other one that's adult-sized enough to be a surfer. So we could have had Mad Max the surfing movie.
Yes.
It could have been like Point Break or something like that. With Max going to the beach and infiltrating a bunch of surfers. I mean, we could have gotten a completely different type of movie. I mean, because heaven knows, I mean, Australian surfing movies are so rare. I mean, what have we got? It's just like Drift, Morning of the Earth, Thicker Than Water, Busting Down the Door, Fighting Fear, Minds in the Water, Storm Surfers 3D, Crystal Voyager, Storm Riders, Bra Boys, Blood is Thicker Than Water, Stephanie in the Water, Momentum, Under the Influence, The Fantastic Plastic Machine, Puberty Blues, Bunyip Dreaming, Newcastle, Uncharted Waters. Like, we don't get any Australian surfing movies.
Yeah, few and far between.
Yeah, it's really an untapped genre.
Okay, can we just cut back? Was there one called Puberty Blues?
Yes, there was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was made in 1981.
Okay.
But anyway, getting back to the movie.
Yeah.
So they kind of stop along the riverbank here. And I was going to say, as soon as the van stops, the dog jumps out of the window, but I think he starts bolting out of the window before the van even comes to a full stop.
Yes. And Max notices this. He I don't know, he makes a little face, a little curious, wondering why the dog was so eager to get out of the car. Mm. And actually, I'm curious at Max's curiosity.
Yeah.
Because most animals would prefer to be not in a car rather than in a car. Mm-hmm. So given the opportunity to jump out the window, they might take it. Especially a young dog who isn't trained by its new owners.
Yeah. Who literally just met his new owners.
Yes.
Like, what, a day ago?
I think so. It's kind of hard to tell, but I think so.
Like, this is still a very fresh dog to this family.
Yes.
And so
he has no training. Being
stuck in the back of that van with Sprague as they're jumbling down the road, like, of course he would jump out the first chance he gets.
Yes.
Yeah. And in the next shot, we see the dog kind of running along the side of the van towards the back, just off into the field.
Yes.
And as Max kind of turns his way back in, Jessie is talking about something. I don't know. I'm kind of unsure about this. Like, on the one hand, I have a really good idea of who she's talking about, but on the other hand, like, for years watching this movie, I've thought it was someone else. Basically, after Jessie and Max put Sprague in the back, she says, I can still see his face now, looked as if he'd swallowed a brick.
Now,
and
I immediately thought that she was talking about Toecutter. I never thought anything else.
For years, I thought she was talking about Sprague looking like he swallowed a brick because she'd been driving so crazy. Like, because he was the...
Okay.
And I mean, they're holding Sprague.
Yeah.
Right before she says that. And so I just...
Oh.
It just felt obvious to me. But in watching this so many times, I had to realize that, you know, as soon as she need Toecutter, yeah, he kind of looked like he had swallowed a brick.
Yeah. Now that you explain it, I can see how it goes both ways. She could be talking about either Sprague or Toecutter. And I mean, the rules of grammar that when you use... I'm not great on the rules of grammar, so bear with me. When you use like a he, she, they, it refers to the last person that you named by name, which...
Or the last person you were talking to?
Yes.
It's the pronoun game.
Yes. Which would have been Sprague.
Yeah, because as the dog is running out the window and running along the side of the van, Jessie's like talking to Sprague, saying like,
yeah,
do you want to drive the car? Yeah, well,
yeah.
We wouldn't have a car anymore, into the back. And so...
Oh, that's what she says.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand. That's great.
Yeah, because she's got Sprague in her lap and she's behind the wheel, and so she talks about how if Sprague were to try and drive the car, him being an 18-month-year-old.
Yeah.
I said it again, 18-month-year-old.
18-month
So dumb.
old.
Anyway, if this toddler baby were trying to drive the car, he would drive them straight into a tree or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, that's cute.
But yeah, because she's talking to Sprague and interacting with Sprague, when she says, I can still see his face now, my instant thought was, okay, Sprague looked like he had swallowed a brick.
Yeah, because he was crying and very, very upset. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, his ice cream was going places that weren't his mouth, and so he was upset.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Okay, I can see how it goes both ways. I do think she's talking about the Toecutter, but grammatically speaking, she's talking about Sprague.
Yeah, and so when Max leans back and says, well, what a mean old lady are you? And then he says, huh, boss. And he's kind of talking to Sprague when he says that. And so I got this whole sense for, like I said, long time watching this movie. And it's just recently that I got the sense that no, they weren't talking about Sprague, they were talking about the Toecutter. And so that kind of changes the tone of this conversation, because they're no longer talking about Sprague looking distressed. They're joking about the harassment situation that Jessie just went through.
Yes. And first, it tells us that she's already told Max everything.
Which is totally understandable, because
yes.
she speeds into the mechanic shop, tells Max to get in, and they leave the tire behind.
Yeah.
Of course, his first question is going to be asked,
What's going
on? So, yes, I think she told him what went on, but I think she might have sugarcoated it. Made it seem like less of a harrowing situation. Maybe downplayed the amount of people that were there giving her a hard time, or really downplayed how threatening he was. You know what I mean?
Yes. I think we've talked a lot about how Max protects her, and she may be doing the same thing.
Yeah. And I mean, of course she wouldn't want Max to worry necessarily, but at the same time...
Yeah, she also may not want him to overreact.
Yeah.
She may feel like, all right, let's just get out of danger, and then that's the end of it. Whereas, perhaps, if Max found out and knew the true extent of what had happened, he would want to do something about it.
Yeah, and there's...
she's not taking that chance.
We're going to see tomorrow a couple of characters discussing this situation, and there are some people that are concerned, there are some people that are fairly dismissive, and they're all various levels of that given their information on the situation. And I think that really ties back to, you know, what did she tell Max? How in-depth did she go? How much information does he really have?
I agree. I think she's holding back to protect him.
And I think we're definitely going to have to put a pin in this for later on in the movie, because something bad is happening in minute 74. It's coming sooner than you think. And Max is going to get really upset, after that happens. And this is kind of more for tomorrow, but, he's hearing the situation. He's not reacting super serious about it. And so that might come back and haunt him a little bit. The levity with which he treats the experience that she just had.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
I'm sure that is part of the madness of Max.
Yeah. So we'll put a bookmark in here so that we can refer back to it. Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
So Max calls her a mean old lady, and then she leans over in the car and she starts punching him. She says, "That's enough out of you, mate." He gives him a good old ribbing, so to speak.
Yes, they're very playful with each other.
Oh, yeah.
It's sweet.
It's part of their charm,
Yes.
I think. But as they're doing that, we get a shot of the side of the van and we hear this whimpering sound, and it's supposed to be the dog because the dog has found something.
Yes, he
And
has.
It's okay, I've been around a lot of dogs, and I have never heard them make that sound when they've found something to play with. Whether it's an animal or a stick or something, it's never that whimpering. That whimpering is kind of reserved for,
when they get hurt.
They've stepped on something sharp, or, something is aggravating them to the fact that to the point that they're distressed. The choice to use that specific sound effect doesn't make sense to me.
I agree, but when a dog is happy with something that they found, do they really make noise? I mean, they don't bark, they don't whine.
Yeah. Well, I've heard them make not barking noises, not
That's
aggressive,
true.
loud barks, but more playful yips and things like that.
Maybe some growling, trying to get it off, trying to detach it from the car so he can go play with it in his own space.
Yeah.
So maybe some growling there.
It just seemed like an odd choice.
It did, but they had to use some sort of sound effect that would reach into the car and catch Jesse's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's not a normal sound. I should go check it out.
Yeah. And so she leans out the window. She says, "What's the matter with you?" And then she kind of gets out and walks along. And as she rounds the back of the van, she can see that the dog is messing with something on the end of a chain. And she says, "What do you got there, mate?" And it kind of reminded you the fact that they haven't really given the dog a name yet.
Yes, and actually the lines that she says, calling out for him as she's getting out of the car, walking down the side, it almost sounds like, when you're in a social situation and you can't remember somebody's name.
Calling them Sport or Slugger.
Yes, and purposely avoiding calling them by name because you can't remember what it is. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like they purposely didn't give the dog a name, which we theorized a few minutes ago that they've only had the dog for maybe a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite possible that they haven't named it yet, but that does seem odd.
Yeah. Well, it's important that we don't get too emotionally connected to the dog.
Right.
Yeah.
This is not a happy ending movie. We should try and keep our emotions in check.
Exactly. When we were watching the crew commentary, they were saying that even in lighthearted moments, there's still that kind of undertone of a threat.
Oh, yes. This is the perfect example of this. We just saw some playfulness between the family, and it was really sweet, and a lot of the tension from what had happened previously with speeding off seemed to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes right back when she gets out of the car. Even when they're having a moment of levity, something bad is happening right behind their car.
Yeah. And so, like I said, she gets to the corner and she kind of kneels down to see what the dog has found. And it's here that we kind of get an IMDb goof. Specifically sorted under the crew or equipment visible. It depends on what version of the movie you're watching.
Yes.
Because on the Blu-ray, they crop it out. On the DVD, they don't necessarily crop it out. But if you follow the chain up to the top corner of the frame, you can see a crew member holding on to the chain. Because when they originally shot it in that, I think it's a 3:4 aspect ratio, that crew member's hand wouldn't have been in there. And if they letterbox it the right way, you don't see it. But they kind of goofed up when they released it on the DVD.
Yeah, and I think that happens a lot. I know there was a big story a little while ago about Friends, where I think it was when they reframed it for maybe when they put it out on Netflix, you can see the lookalike stand-ins that were, when it was on TV, they were out of view. Mm-hmm. But now that it's on Netflix, you can clearly see people who kind of look like Rachel or kind of look like Monica standing off to the side so that the actors don't have to be there, but the people talking to them have someone to look at.
Yeah.
Who's in their proper place.
Yeah, because I mean, the way the chain is hanging down through the shot, if they had it hanging off of the roof rack, it kind of would have just been different. It wouldn't have been perfect for the angle and the frame that they were going for.
Yes, they wanted it to look just so.
Mm-hmm. And
it's all part of the movie magic.
Yeah, it's part of the movie magic that
converting older movie magic to newer movie magic.
Sometimes you get things like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Jessie kneels down and she kind of pushes the dog away or reaches down to the chain, and we get a close-up on Jessie's eyes and they go wide. And we see her eyes, they go wide, and then we see what is on the end of that chain. And let's see, how did the crew describe it? A dollar store prop hand with a piece of pork chop hanging off of it to attract the dog.
Yes.
And it is
so a very cheap effect.
Oh, it is gray and...
Yeah, well painted.
Dirty and...
And I know Cundalini is a villain here.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, really feel for him. I mean... having your hand ripped off in that way is horrendous.
Yeah.
And I just cannot imagine. I cannot imagine how awful that must have been for Cundalini.
Yeah, because it definitely flew in the face of his original plan. Like, his original plan was probably, okay, take the chain, step 1. Step 2, hit the van with the chain.
Yeah.
Step 3, window breaks. Step 4, van, hooray. But just the unluck that he had of wrapping around that roof rack and having this speeding car pull him off his feet and pull his hand just off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's no surprise that later on in the movie he looks as sickly as he does.
Yeah, I don't remember the next time we see him.
We see him next after Jessie gets back from the beach.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
The to and from the beach.
Get to the beach first.
That's a bit of a haul.
Yeah.
Remember when we were complaining about Goose's motorcycle ride?
Oh yeah, that was nothing compared to what's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A ferry service or, bus ride would have been a lot faster, it seems. But it's May's farm. She doesn't have, a quick way to and from the aspects, or rewind again. It's May's farm. She doesn't have, like a quick way to go to the far end of her property or anything like that.
Yeah.
Aside from this hand looking awful and the implication of Cundalini having it torn off so violently, like, it's got most of its fingers wrapped around the chain, but one of the fingers is standing up, and it's the ring finger, and I'm like, okay. So they really missed an opportunity with these fingers standing up. To instead of having just the ring finger standing up, they could have stood up the index and middle finger and given it the classic forks gesture, as if he was trying to flip off Jessie and Max as one final... post-arm gesture of how the hand would necessarily be feeling.
Yes.
And even if they only had the option of putting up one finger, they could have used the middle finger instead of the ring finger for us, Americans that do things differently. It would still be a vulgar gesture, but the more I thought about it, it's like that level of cheekiness would definitely fit in like the Evil Dead movies. Maybe not so much this first Mad Max movie. But even so, just the fact that one finger is standing up, I'm like, oh, missed opportunity, guys. Missed opportunity.
Yeah, it would have been funny.
Yeah. But Jessie is not laughing at this hand that she has found, because she responds to it by flinging herself against the side of the van with her hands raised, and she just lets out a single yell of Max's name and then covers her mouth. Like, total overreaction movie response.
Okay.
I have never seen anyone react that way.
Okay, I agree that it's a dramatic movie response, but I would challenge you, for one, have you ever seen a severed hand unexpectedly?
No.
So you've never experienced that reaction yourself. Have you ever seen somebody have a reaction after seeing a severed hand?
Can't say I have.
No, so you have no idea how people would react. The only context you have is movies. And for a lot of things, that movies experience. That's the only time we see people react to stuff like that, because that just doesn't happen to most people in their normal lives.
Yeah, but a lot of the times when people find severed body parts in movies and TV shows, their immediate response is revulsion, not like flinging themselves back like they're in some sort of antebellum South.
Okay, no, I did see that as a revulsion. She spun around the car to get away from it quickly, which put her back up against the car. And then her hands, she had been quite close to the hand, so she pulled them back again in revulsion, and they ended up like above her shoulders. I think, especially for being dramatic movie response, I thought it was very good and accurate.
I thought it
Although
was
I have
so
no
silly
context
looking.
for it either.
Yeah.
I did really appreciate that she didn't go all damsel in distress and just scream until somebody, reacted to her. She called for the person who at that moment could honestly help her.
Yeah. The one person that she knows that probably has seen stuff like that.
Yeah. And the only other person around.
Yeah.
So she had her wits about her enough to not just do a generic scream, but to call for Max.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate her not going full scream queen with that.
Yes.
It really reminds you that Jessie is not your typical, frail woman who needs to lean on her guy type of character.
She is very tough, and we have learned a lot about her toughness in the last few minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after she yells for Max, we get a fade to black. We fade up from black, and the van is on the move. They are going somewhere to meet someone, and we get the tiniest little bit of view at the person they find at the end of this drive.
Yes.
But that happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we will talk about it tomorrow. In the meantime, our website is madmaxminute.com. You can follow us on Twitter at madmaxminute and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/madmaxminute. We also have a listeners page. So while you're on Facebook, search for Mad Max Minute Beyond Microphone and join us there.
Thank you for joining us for Mad Max Minute number 61. We'll see you tomorrow.
Motorbikes and leather men take